If we're being honest, 1995 wasn't the strongest year for video games. The best description I have is transitional. The Saturn and PlayStation 1 were just taking their baby steps in the West, with loving parents Sega and Sony being mindful when they get too close to the corners of tables and warning them away from putting their fingers in the bottom of the elderly cat. The first batches of titles for these shiny new toys were largely underwhelming, with a few exceptions. The Mega Drive, or Genesis if you prefer, was largely an afterthought for Sega at this juncture, but Nintendo was still a year away from their next generation effort, which was then, at that point, called Project Reality, where graphics would look real. And boy, look at that. Didn't they just look real? So it is the aging Super Nintendo system, along with the arcade and PC's continued emergence as a game system that carry the bulk of the games of 1995 here. In world news, footballing fruitcake Eric Cantona drop-kicked a Crystal Palace fan. Two actors from an ITV drama about soldiers had a very successful but very short-lived musical career. But as one is Bronn from Game of Thrones, I'm sort of okay with it in retrospect. I wouldn't listen to it myself. It was more for like sort of middle-aged ladies who sort of fancied him. But, let it be. Let it be, he's Bronn. That's okay. The first major all-CG movie was released. It was called Toy Story. A great movie for families, especially children and mums who had toys of their own named after the two main characters. In April, we had to all remember extra digits in our telephone numbers. Okay, it was an extra one, and it was always in the same place, but I still don't know my mobile number, and I've had that since 2001. Goddamn, stop making it so difficult. The numbers are long enough. Thanks. For a game to feature on my best of the year list, it has to have come out on its original format in that particular year. So for instance, I couldn't have chosen Street Fighter 2 on the Super Nintendo because it had come out in the arcades a few years before. However, if a game is sufficiently different, such as the NES version of Double Dragon, then I can include that, as it's not that similar to Double Dragon in the arcades. Capiche? It just about makes sense to me. It probably won't make sense to any of you, but I'm sticking with these rules, even though I'll probably break them later on. I'm not very consistent. If you walked into an arcade in 1995, you'd find your choices kind of limited. Not as limited as they are now, of course, but generally in 1995 you'd see polygonal racers, light gun shooters or one-on-one fighters, and that would be about it. My favourite of the old school 2D fighters of the mid-1990s was undoubtedly Marvel superheroes. Capcom's X-Men Children of the Atom, which preceded this, was good, but this one had Spider-Man, it had the Hulk, it had Iron Man, and a veritable Infinity War smorgasbord of classic Marvel characters. Actually, it didn't have many at all. In fact, some of the X-Men came over from the last game. Wolverine, because he's Wolverine. Bad guys Juggernaut and Magneto obviously made an appearance. And Psylocke obviously joined them as well, because no one was more 1990s than Psylocke. She was like an alt girl with massive breasts and a perfectly smooth bum that she managed to show both at the same time in a frame. Trust me, you had to be there. Quite why Capcom went with some of the other characters they did, I don't know. I mean, the Lovecraftian Shuma Gorath, how many times does he appear in the comics? And Blackheart, well, they're not really top tier Marvel characters, are they? Especially when you've got so many other characters you could choose from. But, that's their choice, and it's fine. The game is great despite that. It's ultra quick, it's super bombastic, telefantastic. Street Fighter turned up to 11 action. It's brilliant. It's excellent fun and an absolute classic. I really loved Mario World. It was fantastic and my all-time favourite platformer. So I was very excited by the arrival of the sequel, Yoshis Island. The previews in the magazines looked glorious. The soft pastel graphics were a technological feat for the Super Nintendo and a stylistic choice that ranks Yoshi's Island as the very, very best looking game on the system. And then I played it. The gameplay is fantastic, it's great, but it's not the best. I know many people who prefer it to Mario World, but for me something was not quite right about it. I still love the game, it's really good, don't get me wrong, but the guarding of baby Mario can be irritating at times and the level design isn't quite up there with Mario 4. It's not you, Yoshi, it's me. I hope you can understand. I'm so sorry. Keep in touch, fella. We could still be friends, right? Uh-oh, I think I've upset him. Sony needed something to get them to where they are now as a games hardware producer. They were literally starting from scratch at this point. The PlayStation 1 was entering a market dominated by Nintendo and Sega, and all they had to get their foot in the door was a very large marketing budget. Wipeout, it turned out, was their trump card. Tarted up with a banging contemporary EDM soundtrack covered in gorgeous futuristic art by the Designers Republic and unleashed into clubs across Europe, Wipeout was the closest thing the PS1 had to a killer app in the West at that point. The fast, rolling racetracks often seemed impossibly daunting to a newcomer, but each one of them rewarded the player for repeated tries. Each time you tried, you'd shave a little bit more off that time, and it was a game that encouraged you to do this. F-Zero, well, it looked like a dad wearing teenager's clothes in comparison, whereas Wipeout, it just dripped with cool. I'm still useless at it though, that's because I'm not an F-Zero dad, I wear terrible clothes. On-rail light gun shooters, due to the relentless march of HD television technology, are largely a forgotten genre in the home, pretty much because you can't play them. In the arcade, as reduced and ticket happy as they are these days, they really are quite sad to go into, you can still pick up a plastic pistol or wrestle a brightly coloured vibrating rifle to your elbow and blast away with gay abandon at all manner of hapless, multitudinous cannon fodder. One of that genre of games you're more likely to see than any other will probably have the word Namco on it, followed by the word Time Crisis, and then a number somewhere on it, seeing as Time Crisis has continued way into the 2010s, the last game coming out in 2015, which, Christ, it's 5 years ago already. I'm scared. The series has lasted well, and with good reason. Time Crisis features frenetic action from the outset, with the innovative pedal enabling you to duck, seek cover and swerve the endless hot lead that's bought a ticket to your face station. It's an enduring classic and probably the best regarded and most well remembered light gun shooter, and with good reason. An absolutely essential play if you see one in the wild, and you probably will. Without doubt, I Have No Mouth and I Must Scream is the most miserable game you could ever play. There has never been a game so devoid of hope, happiness and joy than I Have No Mouth and I Must Scream. An evil AI called AM has destroyed humanity, save from 5 people who it has kept alive for over a century, repeatedly torturing them by creating digital adventures based on their worst experiences and their worst crimes, with themes like rape, Nazi genocide and insanity forming the basis of these cruel little worlds that the AI has created. Wow, eh? The point-and-click adventure based on an equally morbidly miserable short story by author Harlan Ellison isn't as technically impressive as some of the scum adventures by LucasArts, but its very adult exploration of the human mind sets it apart from most other games in the genre. It is an absolutely incredible experience, and there are 7 endings, 6 of which are bad and 5 of which sees the AI turn you into a pink blob that's kept alive just so it can torture you forever. Yeah, it sounds lovely, doesn't it? Christ, I feel miserable now. Sensible Soccer was, without doubt, the pinnacle of soccer sims of the 16-bit era, but it wasn't the only contender. FIFA back then looked flash, but played poorly, and with its isometric perspective giving it an aesthetic edge, but it made play control unwieldy and cumbersome. Now Konami's ISS Deluxe, otherwise known as Jikyo World Soccer 2 Fighting 11 in Japan, boy they love those crazy names, that took its cues from the many overblown soccer games found in the arcade instead, and it probably produced the era greatest iteration of the most popular viewpoint of a football game, the one we still see today. You know the one. It's the one where you're from sort of an elevated side of the pitch, known by many, okay just me, as a heron stuck on the head of a giraffe view. Yes, should trademark that really, shouldn't I? Crisp controls that were very responsive, a daft commentary which, you know, they've never really fixed Konami, an attempt at a variable crowd atmosphere, fantastic gameplay, and attempts at recreations of famous players like Baggio, Ravanelli, Bergkamp, Valderrama and Lechkov gave the game a character that a lot of its contemporaries didn't. The other thing I really liked about ISS Deluxe was the never seen again scenario mode, where friendlies and qualifiers from the previous couple of years were laid before you with a limited time limit and the opportunity to rewrite football history. It's a great feature that I think should be included in modern football games. So why don't you do it? Why don't you do it? Anyway, I love ISS Deluxe. It's a great game. Goal! Long-time viewers will remember that I had a certain fondness for a relatively ignored Mega Drive real-time strategy game called Herzog's Spy. So you can imagine my delight when a friend showed me Command and Conquer on a LAN network back in 1995. A masterful experience sees the player multitasking, managing outposts, Tiberian farms, garrisons of troops, all while awaiting the inevitable big attack by the CPU or drunk mate who's gone suspiciously quiet in the corner, hasn't he? What are you up to? Why are you smiling like that? Oh my god, you've just blown up my base. That smile wasn't normal. I knew it. Anyway, what a great experience that game is. One of the genre-defining titles that brought the game type into the limelight and brought forth a host of pale imitators. Command & Conquer has aged better than most of the games on this list and is still worth a play today. Go on, hop it, go and play it. No, hey, wait, come back, I haven't finished yet. The simplicity of Worms belies its greatness. To the untrained eye, Worms is nothing more than the mechanics of a low-tier golf game overlaid into some poorly presented annelid-on-annelid warfare. But though Worms is that, and it is that, when you introduce 4 other people, liberal amounts of alcohol, and a competitive streak and all, Worms becomes one of the funniest yet tense experiences you can share with other hairless apes. As Frank Carson would say, it's a cracker. That's not a great accent, is it? Never mind. So, Tekken 2. Yes, Tekken 2. I've got to talk about the arcade one because I set the rules, and even though I played it on the PlayStation 1, I've got to put it in the wrong year. Man, why did I come up with these dumb rules? Tekken 2, referenced in Shaun of the Dead, my favourite British movie of all time.
At that time we stayed up all night drinking apple schnapps and playing Tekken 2.
When was that?
That was 5 years ago.
my favourite in the series, and the one fighting game I spent more time with than any other. A huge cast of characters, some hilariously bad cutscene CG, some fantastic music, and accessible but difficult to master gameplay puts Tekken 2 a class above other fighters on the system. Tekken 3 is often declared the better game, but objectively, well, it probably is. However, there was a certain feel and presentation to Tekken 2 that saw it eclipse its later iterations for me. The week I spent unlocking all the hidden characters and endings was something I won't forget, and I won't be able to repeat because you now have to buy them. You can shove your Robocop DLC up your fleshy fudge ton on Mortal Kombat, quite frankly. Now sod off. Yoshi, I take it all back. I've been miserable since you've left. I miss what you can do with your tongue. Show me your blocks. Yes, those blocks. Tetris Attack, known as Panel de Pon in Japan, was developed by Intelligent Systems and released by Nintendo for the Super NES in 1995. Despite the name, Tetris Attack bears little relation to the famous puzzle game of the same name. The player is tasked with swapping and rearranging coloured blocks, with 3 or more blocks clearing when they touch. As the stage progresses, the blocks will continue to rise up the screen, with new sets of blocks generating from the bottom. Should the blocks touch the top of the screen, the game is over, your goose is cooked, and it's time to start again. Like all puzzle games, Tetris Attack is very easy to pick up and very difficult to put down. One player is fun, but the 2-player mode is a palm-dampening evening burner. It is genuinely one of the greatest 2-player games on this planet and well worth a look. It is my top game of 1995. Not a vintage year for video games, but there was some good ones in there. I'm sure you'll agree. However, it was just the calm before the storm. There were some good games on the horizon, so tune in for them. I'll see you soon. Okay, thanks, bye.